All right, let's bring Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com in. Frank, we'll pop you in and get your take real quick. This Herrera arrested for domestic violence, and what more do we know? The Phillies have put out a statement. We know that he's been placed on administrative leave by Major League Baseball. So what do we know, and what is the penalty potentially that Herrera is staring at here?
Well, the Phillies did what they had to do, which is let Major League Baseball immediately put him on administrative leave. And really at this point, the Phillies can't say a thing until this investigation's over. I mean, for their own legal protection, whatever else. But it's clear, like that MLB says now, you have to get the guy off the field. So they're going to do this investigation, and probably they'll take about a week to decide if a suspension is warranted. And this suspension is going to be something separate from any legal proceedings that may or may not take place. There's been plenty of times where maybe somebody decides not to press charges, but the Major League Baseball administrators have stepped in and still levied a suspension. So if he is indeed guilty of this, the allegations are very serious, and I would expect there to be a very significant penalty here for Herrera. Looking at some of the previous suspensions, we saw Addison Russell with the Cubs just come off a 40-game suspension that lasted from September of last year up until just recently. So until we find out more of the details, it's kind of hard to guess how stern this penalty will be, but it's clear that baseball is not going to tolerate any of this anymore.
Now, you were asked in one of your mailbag questions, and I know you said you had to kind of answer real quickly as this came out, but in the first sentence, Mike asked, with Odubel out for the foreseeable future, if not forever, what would you do about center field? You said, I believe that if Odubel is guilty of what he has alleged, he may never play for the Phillies again. So do you think that's a stance that they would take?
I think looking back in history, the Brett Myers situation, they kind of screwed up. Now I'm not judging what Brett may or may not have done. Certainly there were not what is alleged here, which are visible marks on the young lady in question here. We didn't have any of that, but just the fact that the Phillies, when the Brett Myers instance happened, he made his next start, which was just a couple of days later, and that made the Phillies look really, really, really bad. That they did not take immediate action like baseball does now, and it's pretty much mandatory that if the allegation happens, immediate administrative leave takes place. And then they'll decide the facts and get back to it. Because, let's face it, you want to give anybody in this country their due process. You have to give them that opportunity, but the administrative leave is something that needs to happen immediately when that takes place. And I think the optics of Brett Myers, even though it may not have been the level of what was alleged here, you just can't tolerate this anymore.
Frank, I know that Osuna, when he got suspended, I think it was 75 games, and Addison Russell got 40. What, to your knowledge, is the system or the protocol that MLB uses when doling out a punishment, and how long it's going to be? How do they compare one case to another? I find it strange that it's not like a steroid thing where they don't have and maybe they do and I just don't realize it, and an across-the-board policy, a specific number of games.
Yeah, that's a good question. The Ozuna thing involved a handgun, so I don't know if they thought that was worse.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they don't want to lock themselves in either to a particular allegation, because obviously there are levels of severity when it comes to physical violence, and I don't think that they want to paint everything with one broad brush. So I don't believe there is any standard set of games, but it's clear more and more that Major League Baseball is simply not going to tolerate it. So I would expect it to be heavy, no matter what that is. I will add too, with Addison Russell, he was not eligible for the postseason. I think that kind of comes with it. That if a player is suspended in this way, they're not eligible for the postseason. So I think the Phillies might just move on at this point, especially since lately he hasn't been playing well. You really want to separate what the player can do on the field from the severity of this, but I personally, if I'm the Phillies, would move on. If you just look on social media how some of the fans have reacted to this, if he is indeed guilty of this, I think it's overwhelming that the fans don't want to see him play for the Phillies ever again.
So that's I find that interesting, Frank. But I also feel, and not that I'm sitting here trying to defend someone who's accused of domestic assault, but if you have this zero tolerance policy, if you get rid of Odubel immediately, then you have now created that precedent and that standard. And what happens if a week or two from today it's Bryce Harper or Reese Hoskins or Aaron Nola? Are they really going to do the same thing? No. I think everybody knows that they would not do the same thing. And I think I have to understand that and take this into account when they treat Odubel Herrera, that people want Odubel Herrera out now because they're as frustrated with the player's play as they are with the act. And I think you have to separate one from the other. You either make it ironclad for everybody or you don't.
Right, and I would actually kind of flip that around. I mean, I think that the superstars need to be held to the same standards, but I think that if you're looking at it the other way, that they would want a bigger statement perhaps. Maybe the knee-jerk reaction is to have a bigger statement for the bigger name player. And, if you can look at it the other way. So if something happens with a star player, and I don't want to throw out a name there because,
Right, I probably shouldn't have done that. I was just trying to use a hypothetical.
You know what I mean? Because I don't want to connect anybody's name with any such awful thing, and I think the Phillies have a lot of guys of high character. But if superstar Joey Smith 5 years from now commits something, and if you look back and say, oh well, Odubel Herrera only had such and such and such, then I think you're kind of committing yourself in the wrong direction the other way. So I really do think it needs to be consistent. I don't think it holds the star players to any lesser standards, and really you have to operate that way because. Again, it could go both ways.
Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com. So with the potential of Herrera being done for an extended period of time, what's next in center field? Because there was already questions about, are we going to start to see more Kingery? What are some of the options now in that spot?
Well, the Phillies really don't have a lot of options in center field right now. Of course, Roman Quinn's still out. Arnold Terry is already on his second major league team since the Phillies designated him for assignment. So they really don't have a natural center fielder. So what I think that means for the Phillies, probably the next couple of nights for sure, you're going to see Scott Kingery out there. I assume Nick Williams
McCutchen,
will
by the way,
reappear.
is starting there tonight.
Right. So I Nick Williams will reappear.
Nick Williams is playing. By the way, he's playing left tonight. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So you kind of expect to revisit that alignment. Wasn't an ideal alignment. You'll see some of that. I expect you to see some of Kingery out there. But if I'm the Phillies, I pick up the phone and I call the Yankees because the Yankees just grabbed Cameron Maiden to play center field for them for just as a fill-in. And if you look at the Yankees, they're about to get Giancarlo Stanton back soon, and I might just see if I can grab a veteran like that who can be a center fielder to be around just in case we see Scott Kingery not cutting it out there. But yeah, you'll probably see a lot of nights like tonight with McCutchen in center and Williams in left until somebody else enters the mix. But that is really not an ideal situation either.
Herrera's first court date, by the way, June 17th.
Do you think eyes are now on Gabe Kapler, Frank, because this is kind of the first, I guess, somewhat of a crisis, off-field crisis that he's had to deal with here in Philadelphia, and there's that kind of looming specter of what happened in L.A. when he was an executive there, and I don't know all the details, but I know that there were some accusations going on of players not behaving well, and he was kind of caught in the center of it, and it seemed to be swept under the rug now. But I mean that'll probably get dragged up by somebody over the next week or two.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know Nick Francona, son of Indians manager Terry Francona, of course, former Phillies manager too. But Nick Francona has been highly critical of Kapler for his handling of a particular situation. He's had several issues with Kapler, I will say, and so I think that does draw extra attention to Kapler to make sure that the case is handled right, because there are some that there was a situation with an unnamed player in the Dodger system when Gabe Kapler worked in the minor league system there about whether or not Kapler would have known if an alleged assault occurred or something of the sort, and Kapler was very vocal and gave his side of that on his own website immediately after such an allegation was made. So, so he did defend himself, and I would encourage people to read both sides. But certainly that has drawn some extra attention to Kapler. So he probably needs to handle this carefully. And I would say all of the Phillies public relations staff will be dusting off their crisis communication textbooks to make sure that that the right approach takes place here.
Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com for more on this Odubel Herrera stuff. Keep it locked. If new news comes out, which just did, his court case will be June 17th, which you would imagine he will not play before that.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect him to, no.
Okay. Frank Klose, at Frank Klose with a K. Check him out, 97.3 ESPN.com. Thanks, pal.
Thanks, guys.
That was well done.
See you, Frank.
And, look, now you're in a situation where you just mentioned Kapler has had
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions.
itchy background.
Here. How does Gabe Kapler? Although I do think Kapler gets bailed out in this situation because it becomes more about MLB and how they handle it than the Phillies.